A little over 3 years ago, we had 4 families and a handful of college students that were just so full of audacious faith that we took a step of faith and we started the link on February 24th, 2013, and we saw 157 people at our very first service. It was unbelievable. It was so much fun. It was like a blur in the back of our minds because it so exceeded our expectations to what could really happen. In that journey, it was amazing what God was doing. It was a miracle. But before we started, we didn't even have a sound system. Through this journey, you can't just start a church. Like, you have to have partners. And we thought we had a partner, but it had fallen through. In fact, we were starting the journey without a partner. And then in 2011, we met a guy named Jeff Leake, and he had planted about 10 churches over the past 10 years, but God had placed a burden on his heart to start 100 churches over the next 10 years. That's amazing. That's a lot of churches. And he said, hey, what if we partnered together to start this life-giving church in Boston? And through our partnership, they committed the first $30,000 to get our church started. And then through a series of events, my home church, the Oaks Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, committed $10,000, and then Life Church in Midlothian, Texas, and then one church in Ohio, and one church after another began to believe and buy into what was happening here at the Link in a major way. It was a miracle. We began to build a team here in Boston, and let me just tell you, it wasn't an easy process. Our first meeting, we thought, man, we're gonna have all these people show up, and we had 3 people show up. No one came besides my friends. It was kind of a letdown, to be honest. It didn't feel like a miracle. It didn't feel very great, but we knew that God had called us to something greater than ourselves. So we didn't stop, even though it was difficult. We continued to move forward. We continued to fight. In fact, that first summer when I moved here in 2012, we said, why don't we have a football and cheer outreach? We had these partnerships through Kevin and Debbie Hallinan, who are serving on the dream team here at the Link, and they had worked and served in this arena for a while, and they said, what if we had a football and cheer camp? What if we had a football camp just this first year? Maybe we have 50 kids. Let's pray for 50 kids this first year. And so we opened up registration, and within the first 4.5 hours, we had 50 kids registered. We were way over our heads, like overwhelmed to the max. And it was a miracle. I mean, it was simply a miracle that God was opening up the door to give us influence in an area that we didn't even move to just 6 months ago. In 2014, we were just about 6 months old. 7 months old at the time, and we were struggling through the summer. I mean, we were grinding it out. I mean, we had 157 people at our first service, but by this point in 2014, in July and August, we were running maybe 40, 45 people on a Sunday morning, kids and adults. And man, it was hard, and we were struggling financially, but we didn't want to put stress upon the church. Never stood up, and many of you listening to this video now never stood up and said, hey, we are struggling financially. We just trusted God that if we were faithful with what he entrusted us with, that we would be able to see a miracle in his house. But God came through financial partnership, through people began to give in the church, and we turned the corner that fall because our hope wasn't in ourselves, it was in God. And God did a miracle to show us that our dependency is not upon our own doing, but against his provision. Over the past 3 years, we've seen over 150 people make decisions for Christ. We've seen countless people be water baptized to go public with their faith. That is a miracle. We've seen over 75 people serving on a monthly basis with the gifts and talents that God has given them on the dream team. We've seen partnerships with Parkway Pop Warner, a community leader here, developed. That is a miracle. We've seen over 500 families come and participate in our community events, our trunk or treat, and our Easter egg hunt. And let me just tell you, Link Church, this is just the beginning, and there's a miracle in this house.